While my last couple of videos have been focused on how to use ChatGPT to write, it can also be used to edit fiction. So back in January, I used ChatGPT to outline and write Legends of the Shadow Woods, which is a fantasy novella, in about 12 days, which was pretty cool. Though I did a lot of editing on my own for that project, I did my best to preserve what the AI had generated as sort of a show of what these kind of programs could be like in the future. So I'm going to take an excerpt of that book, about the first page or so, and prompt ChatGPT to edit it in some different ways. And I'll also talk about a few different ways you can use this technology to aid your self-editing process right now. So here up on the screen, I will put the first page or so of Legends of the Shadow Woods. First, I'm just going to prompt it, edit this page of a fantasy story. And as you can see in this example, it has changed almost nothing. And that is because a lot of the times I have found that when you ask GPT to edit something, it will default to editing for things like grammar and spelling issues. And I do want to have a little preface here for the rest of the video. While GPT and similar AI can generate readable chunks of text and be really helpful to writers, don't expect to plug something into ChatGPT and have it spit out the next New York Times bestselling book. At this point with the technology, it really is a you get out what you put in kind of situation. I've done some experimenting with both my GPT generated fiction and my own original fiction. The original stuff just comes out better every single time, even when using the exact same prompts. If the technology does continue to improve, which I believe that it will, this may not be a even thing to think about in the future. Generated GPT content could someday be as good as original written fiction. For this point right now, if you're taking something written by ChatGPT and you put it back into ChatGPT to edit it, it's only going to be able to do so much, you know? So as with all of these new AI technologies, prompts are very important. You have got to be specific with your prompts. Otherwise, you will be doing more editing than GPT. As every writer has their own unique editing process, I'm just going to be going over some of the different things you can edit for with ChatGPT versus like the different rounds of editing you could use it in. First, we're going to look at how ChatGPT can help you edit grammar. This one is probably the most simple. You put in your text, prompt edit this to be grammatically correct, and ChatGPT will fix your typos, misspelling, and grammar issues. So here's a quick little side-by-side comparison on how ChatGPT can do this kind of editing. It's pretty straightforward. As you can see, one has some pretty glaring errors and the other has been cleaned up. Now, this is what I believe most people are referring to when they say they're using ChatGPT to edit their fiction. Basically, you're just using it as a proofreader. It is a really advanced spell check. And while this is all well and good, this just isn't that different from using a program like, say, Grammarly to kind of fix your glaring grammatical and typo errors. So I would say if you are using ChatGPT to do just this kind of editing, I wouldn't say it's really that big of a advantage as far as this technology goes. This isn't what ChatGPT is best at. This is just one thing that it can do. I would argue it's even faster and simpler to do this kind of editing in a program like Grammarly. So personally, I won't be using ChatGPT for this particular function, but go ahead and do it if you would like. But us writers have many different ways that we self-edit and many different rounds of editing. So what are some of the more complex ways ChatGPT can help us while editing? Let's look at those next. So let's say we have this story, but we want to play with changing around our style a little bit. My personal style of prose leans more direct and simple, but let's say I wanted to get a little more literary with a specific project. Let's say either you're not quite sure how to go about writing in a different style, or maybe you just want to try it out for a small portion of the story. But at the same time, you would like to save some time seeing if it is going to be a good fit or not. So let's take the same excerpt from earlier and put a little spin on it. I went ahead and prompted with, edit this to have a literary style of prose, and this is what it outputs. You can see that it's using different language and being more descriptive overall, while still retaining the story. So it is definitely not perfect. In places, it's going to look like you kind of just used a thesaurus. So you'll still need to edit manually after doing this. But I think it can give you a really good starting point if you intend to use its output as part of your writing. Or if you are just using it as an experiment, a way to save time and see what it might look like, it will give you a pretty good idea on how a particular piece might sound with a slightly different style. Very similarly, we can also have ChatGPT help us edit the tone of something. So sometimes a scene just does not come out with the right tone that you were intending, which can lead to a lot of rewrites. When I first tried this one out, I actually had a lot of fun with it. I took the first page from my fantasy work in progress, which is not AI generated at all. So as I said earlier, not only does your prompt really matter, but your input as well. And just keep in mind that ChatGPT can only get you so far. For example, if we take the same excerpt of Legends of the Shadow Woods, which has kind of an ominous or spooky tone, and ask GPT to edit it to have a funny tone, here's the outcome. It's not that great. It kind of just adds exclamation points in places. It can't take something that's already really dramatic and just completely flip it on its head to be funny. So if instead we take the same excerpt and ask it to write it in a more frightening tone, this is what we will get instead. As you can see, this is a much easier transition for it to make because we're already using something that's sort of dramatic. Asking it to go from dramatic to frightening isn't a very big jump. But if you're asking it to go from something that's like a horror novel and then switching it to be like a comedy, you're just not going to get the kind of output you're looking for. Again, ChatGPT can only do so much. As long as you keep the shift in tone to be kind of minor, like not jumping from one extreme to the other, you're probably going to get pretty good results. For example, if you have something that's a little spooky and you ask it to rewrite it in a more of a dramatic way, that'll probably work pretty well. Also, if you have something that's kind of a mild or moderate tone and then you ask it to make it funny or humorous or lighthearted, you'll probably get a pretty good result out of that as well. One issue that I run into frequently when asking ChatGPT to edit something for me is that it has a habit of adding on to the end of what you give it. If you give ChatGPT a paragraph where the character walks across the room, it will edit that the way that you ask it to, but then it will continue on the story after that and give you at least a few more paragraphs of the character reaching the door or something. If the character is thinking about what to do, it will then add them deciding to do it or them actually doing what they were thinking about, which if you're trying to write is probably helpful. But we're not trying to write here, we're trying to edit. Usually means taking out words, not adding more in. So to combat this, I have found it really helpful to add the phrase "without expanding the story" to the end of my prompt. Edit this to have a more fun tone without expanding the story. So far for me, this has had pretty good success. This will keep it from writing more that you will have to cut out later and focusing on the section of the story that you give it. I think a lot of the help that GPT can offer authors and writers right now is saving time. It's not removing your creativity, it is allowing you to try different things, sometimes even more creative things, in a much quicker way. All right, how are you using ChatGPT to edit right now? Are you using any of these techniques? Are you doing totally different things? I would love to hear about them. Please drop a comment down below if you do. And if you'd like to check out Legends of the Shadow Woods or some of my other books, they are all available on Amazon, linked down below. All right, that's all I got for you, so thanks for watching. Bye!